Hello, stranger. Through the umbilical cord of your soul, you're going to meet yourself in the waking world. Welcome to Gaia. Hello, everyone. How are all my little dust bunnies? I hope you're doing great. I know I'm not. But December, why? You might ask. You have this beautiful new room, which thank you. You have this beautiful new dress. Thank you. It's new. And you have a questionably sized mug with Dazai. Yes. And this is actually linked to why I am not very well. Because this mug is full of wine. Because it's St. Trifon's Day here in Bulgaria, which means it is the day of the wine, which means I am single, not ready to mingle, and I'm ready to get sloshed. But you might ask, why are we doing this on YouTube? Because I have to basically survive those horrible books that I'm reading, that I read a long time ago, and that bring me so much suffering that I still haven't managed to actually make a video on those books. This is the third time I'm trying to record this. The first two times I was sober. Obviously, that was my mistake. Now, you can actually see the two books on the stool behind me. I didn't want them anywhere in my vicinity because I don't even want to look at them. And the moment I'm done with those, I've never actually given books to a library. I just either keep them or I leave them at Mr. and Mrs. at Night's place, my parents, and they just, turn into this big library that nobody knows where some of those books came from, collected by them and me, and also some just appear. You have a family of liminal cats. Things are bound to just appear. It's part of existence. Anyway, those are the first books ever, which I am going to. I'm not saying I intend to. I am going to go bring to a library, donate them. I hope they want them, because if they don't, I have an issue. I might try to sell those. Do you have any idea how much I suck at selling things online? I've never managed to sell anything online. Anyway, what are we reading tonight and why am I drinking? So, this is the second and currently most recent book series by Radoslav Kizkinjiev, the guy who we spoke about on my last book review. Then I reviewed his book called Heaven, or Paradise, whatever you want to call it. And that was his first ever book series and his first ever proper novel. This is his most recent book series, but I believe it's not his last novel, just like the one that's series. Even if this technically, is not a book series. This is in fact a single book. But December, you might say. This looks like two books, and I'm going to tell you that's because it is. But this is not a book series. The author himself said that this is just one story that was split into two, like two physical books. But if you actually read the story, and this is something that tripped me the first time because I didn't buy those books together. I bought the first one and then I went and got the second one a month later. And I was very confused after reading the first one because it kind of ends nowhere. Like in the middle of there is no proper ending of a book. It just ends. And I thought, okay, that's I knew he's not a very competent writer, but that just is very strange. And apparently I was in fact wrong, because this is just one story that's split exactly into two. Those books have the exact number of pages, the exact same number of pages, excuse me, which means that he just wrote one story, split it into two. Now, he said that after he trimmed the fat, the story got about 10 pages shorter, and it's about 970 pages right now. It really, it needed more trimming, man. You should have, binned half of this. It's ridiculous. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Also, I'm going to be fixing this in post. Like write drunk, edit sober, same thing. Record drunk, edit sober, and we'll see what happens. So, what is this book series or this story? First of all, it is called Depths. Depths. You know, the deep, where the deep are. Yes. And the first one is called Depths Cracking. The second one is called Depths Sinking or Submerging, going under. You can just pick your favorite synonym. It is written in Bulgarian. And one of the reasons I had to re-record this so many times, and I know 3 times isn't much, but I don't mean I started recording and then I changed my mind and then I wrote another script. No, I mean I had like a whole recorded and an edited, no, not unedited, edited video twice before, and I deleted it because it wasn't right. And if I go into every single detail that I want to tell you about, this video is going to be 5 hours, and I know nobody's even watching the 1 hour ones. So I'm going to not go into this many details, and I'm just going to kind of explain to you why I don't like this specifically. And then, you know, it's up to you. I can make a longer one, I just don't want to because I know nobody's going to want to see it anyway. Also, I made my notes when I was reading this book for the first time. No, the second time. So I read it once, and when I was reading it the second time, I made my notes. This was months and months ago. Like, I have had this book for months and months and months. Like, this video has been so long coming. Like, I had to reread those books like many times to remember what they were about, because I would try to do this and then I would stop, I wouldn't like it, and then rinse and repeat a month later. It's ridiculous. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just going off on my notes, and then when I'm editing I'm going to like compare the video to like the actual book, and if something is not appropriate I'm just going to cut it off, and you're going to see my horrendous editing skills because I am not a video editor at all. my ears jiggle. Oh my god, they do. Holy shit, I just noticed. She's got them jiggle physics. Anyway, so what is this book about? Well, I have a theory, and I'm not sure if it's right. Now, I'm going to go off on the idea that I'm right, and if I'm not, then I'm not. And then a big part of this video, like, the theory kind of makes a lot of it make sense, but if I'm not right, then a lot of it wouldn't make sense, right? And I lost my train of thought. I actually lost my train of thought. Anyway, my theory, right? And I'm saying mine, but it's not just mine. I actually like developed it with a friend during voice chat when I was also kind of intoxicated. This actor is going to give me like an alcohol problem. Okay, like, it's not just once or twice. So, just like Heaven/Paradise, the previous book series, this book tries to be very deep and fails. It's amazing how badly it fails. But I said in the previous video that I'm going to be comparing his first ever book series to his most current one. And you might ask, but is this book better? And I'm going to admit, yes. Instead of a jumbled mess of random plot points, which are honestly just not good, we do have something that can pass for a plot. if by something that can pass for a plot you put things happen in linear order. And we have much fewer flashbacks, which I always approve and appreciate, because it means I don't have to read through pages upon pages of a flashback, which is not well done. Now, this book is better, again, because we do have a kind of linear events happening. And I know it was like the style of the previous one, but that doesn't make it okay. It was just a mess of characters and plots and stuff, which was just needlessly jumbled together. Now, is this better? Yes. Is it good? No. It's not. And you might ask, but you can't objectively say that it's bad. And I'm going to tell you, can't I though? Can't I? Now, art is a matter of taste. Taste is subjective. And I know that based on this, I cannot objectively say that it's bad. But I'm going to tell you instead why I dislike it, and then you can just, if you speak Bulgarian, you can decide whether you want to buy it. I know the author had Paradise/Heaven translated into English. He might even do this one in English too. And if you want to inflict this upon yourself, you might be able to buy it. I am also very bribable, so I could in fact be bribed into doing some type of reading on this book, but that's just if there is interest, because I don't hate myself enough for this. So, what did I tell you so far? I don't like this book. Great, good, moving on. Why I don't like it? You're going to hear all about this. But what is the book about? The main idea, or the main motif, or the main trope, or whatever you want to call it. I know those are not the same things, by the way. I am aware. I have studied literature. The whole idea is that we have those characters. So we have actually like main characters, and we have slightly less main characters, and some are going to say, but first of all, I have a name. It's December. Thank you. But then, after you bow your head in shame, because you're into that, you weirdo, you might say, but December, that's called a secondary character. And I'm going to tell you, you are in fact wrong. Because those characters are very much given their full backstories. They're given all of their drama. They're given all of their issues in the past and why things are happening and all that jazz. They are treated equally by the text as the main characters. And then you might ask, but in this case, why would you say that some are more main than others if the text gives them equal attention? And I'm going to tell you, because of this, again, this understanding which I have of the plot. And this is that this place, this fictional city, which is called Gaia in the book, this fictional city is the ancient Greek version of purgatory. Now, it is not purgatory. I'm going to say this specifically. Because, and I do have whole two, mind you, pieces of evidence for this, which means I could still be very wrong, and if I'm wrong, then shit. My theory is that this is in fact the ancient Greek version of purgatory, not the Christian one, which I'm not actually sure if it's real though, because I know a big part of the Christian imagery comes from the world's greatest piece of fan fiction. If you know, you know. But by now I think everyone knows. Oh well. So, the two things that lead me to believe that this is in fact a place where people go after they die to heal from the trauma of their life and to be able to move on towards the Elysian fields. aka the Greek version, the ancient Greek version of heaven, is that one, there is a river flowing through Gaia, the city. The river is the river Acheron, or I have also heard it called Acheron. I have heard it called Acheron with a ch. In Bulgarian, it is called Acheron with a h, like an H. And here's a fun fact. Acheron is in fact a real physical thing that exists. I really respect the ancient Greeks. They didn't really bother with making up so many places. They just used what was actually around them. We stand. But Acheron is a real physical river which flows through Greece. Acheron is also a real physical river that gets nowhere near Bulgaria. Like, we don't get it here. It doesn't get anywhere close to the border. And also the author doesn't imply that it's the same river, but it is a river called Acheron. Like, it's kind of implied. Acheron is the river of woe, but on her beaches, around it, is a place, it's the part of the underworld where people go to heal. It is a place of healing, not a place of punishment, cleansing and purging the sins of humans. This is actually written in the Suda, which is 10th century encyclopedia. So that's where I'm getting my information from. So through the city flows the river of woe, which is one of the rivers of the underworld. My second kind of clue that this is in fact where dead people are is the fact that Gaia is mentioned to be below sea level. Now, there's a lot of places in the world that are below sea level. Like, I know the Netherlands exists. Like, I am aware. Fun fact about Bulgaria, though, there is no point on the surface, I'm not talking about the cave systems, there is no point on the surface, not even in the deepest valley, that goes below sea level. The whole country is raised, I mean, it's not raised, but it is, like, we do have the sea, the Black Sea. And yet the country itself is a bit higher in altitude. So even the valleys don't drop below sea level. So Gaia is a very fictional place which physically cannot exist in Bulgaria. First of all, because there is a river there which doesn't go to Bulgaria. And second of all, because it is supposedly below sea level, which also doesn't exist in Bulgaria. I've checked. So those two things kind of lead me to believe that this is a metaphor. I mean, not a metaphor, but it's supposed to be this piece of the underworld. And this is where the split between the two types of main character comes. Because we have the more main characters, and those more main characters are people who come from outside of Gaia. Kind of. And they basically are runaways from their place in the world. They did not belong where they originally were. So they run away, and one way or another, at a specific part of their life, they ended up in Gaia. And in Gaia, there is other people there who help them to, to cleanse themselves, to heal, so they could move on. Those people leave Gaia in the end because they no longer need to be there. They have achieved what they were there for. They have healed, they have understood what has happened to them, and they are ready to move to the Elysian fields, the metaphorical heaven, or in this case, to chase their dreams or to achieve their dreams, to be stronger, to finally experience something good in their lives. And for me, the main characters are those who are there to be healed and then to move on. And the secondary main characters, who are not secondary characters, they're still main characters. They're there to help them achieve this. Because those people, in the end, they are kind of there. They either get punished or they don't really experience such catharsis. They don't get the happy ending, if it could even be called that. And then, because I said it's a city, you would say, so we have a few main characters, we have a few not so main characters. What about everyone else? Now, this is something which even the text specifically mentions. There are people living in Gaia. Strangers, random people. There are like bookstores and like clothes shops. There is a whole religious sect with dozens of believers. There is a supermarket. Apparently, there is a school. There's like a lot of. It's a small community somewhere in the mountains, but it is occupied. There is actual people there. And yet, all those people, even those who are named, they are props. They are NPCs, if you will. They are there just so there is a crowd. If a scene needs a crowd, there is one. But you get the really weird feeling that those people, they don't really have lives or homes. They're a very faceless, nameless mob. They're one whole gelatinous entity that shows up on the stage when it's needed, right? They're not even extras. They are cardboard cutouts that you would pull out to put on a stage in a theater to kind of show that there is supposed to be a crowd there. And the very text calls Gaia a stage. Nothing about Gaia feels like a real place. And while I'm sure that the author kind of intended it like this because he actually says it, I'm not sure how much of this was intentional. And I'm saying this because it could either be a very, very, very well done metaphor, very well done imagery, but unless he is like another author who I read like years ago, who is basically the best at creating imagery and scenery and conveying very strong emotion through where something is happening, but is also horrendous at writing actual characters and interactions. I think part of this is accidental. Gaia is this marble white place. It has this giant fountain in the center. And every single place described there feels like it's an empty shell. Feels like those fake cities or towns that they build to drop a new cat to see what happens. There is no feeling of it being lived in. And I know it's just a book, so obviously it's going to be very difficult to convey something like this. But it just doesn't feel real. And again, this is partially on purpose because the author says it in the text that Gaia feels like a stage in a theater, but I'm still not sure how much exactly of this was intentional. Okay. I would tell you about the characters because there is no one linear plot. It's just a few characters, both the main ones and the not so main ones. And they each have their own plot line and they kind of sometimes they interact with each other. And sometimes for a certain period of time they share the plot line. But as a whole, all of them, they don't gather together to move to a shared goal. Each one of them has their own life and their own goal, and they sometimes meet up or something. But before we do this, I would like to address two specific points of this book regarding characters. The first one is the very sexy redheads. Shut up. Understood? God. Anyway, what do I mean by the sexy redheads? There are exactly 3 named characters in this book. Women, obviously. Like, what do you mean you're into red-headed men? What's wrong with you? Pervert. So there's 3 women of bangable age. I mean, like, who appear to be of bangable age, because some of them might be quite ancient. And I know some of you weirdos are into that. But there is, so out of, I would say, let me see how many. So we have Sarah, we have Karina, we have Virginia, we have the witches. Yeah, so I think we have like 5 women who appear to be of, bangable age. 3 of those are sexy green-eyed redheads. I'm not even joking. 3 out of 5 women who can be who the author has put within the can be hot category are green-eyed redheads. Now, sir, I get it. I understand. We all have our preferences. What? What are you talking about? Shh, silence. But maybe tone it down. Just maybe tone it down, okay? We don't need to know. Okay, it's the same thing as the previous book where it was like mother-daughter pairs. I'm like, I get that you're into certain things, certain categories on some certain sides. But we don't need to see it so blatantly staring us in our faces, right? It's just obvious. Anyway, 3 out of 5 women, bangable age, very hot, sexy, green-eyed redheads. One of them is a dominatrix, professional. She likes to go outside on her balcony in her high heels and a silk robe with nothing underneath, and the silk robe is short and also untied. She's basically naked. And she likes to go on her balcony, basically naked, in her high heels, tits out, to dance and drink and smoke, which is something which all women do. I have, asked my neighbors. They have been scandalized more than once. I would say if I had any sense of rhythm. Like, I can't dance even with my feet flat on the ground. I can do a lot in heels though, like I'm good with heels, I just can't dance. Anyway, this is my first point about the characters. Like, we get it. You're into that. It's okay. But please, there are other female, like, visuals you could pick. The other point about the characters, which I want to make, is, okay, so, big stretch. So, in the previous video, if you haven't seen it, go see it, because I also went on a rant there. There is a very blatant self-insert character who is a writer who has like those steely gray eyes, black hair. He's very mysterious. He possesses supernatural power. He's also very hot, mysterious, hot. He's also very mysterious, and did I mention he's hot? He doesn't have much else going on about him aside from being hot and mysterious, and also, I guess either seeing into people's minds, their memories, something. It's not very well explained. But he's absolutely 100% a self-insert, and this is actually confirmed by the foreword, which is written by someone else. In this book, no, those 2 books in fact happen in the same universe. We have references, which I would probably get if I had read like his other books, that are between those. But again, no matter what Kay would say, I'm not a masochist. Take that. Anyway, in this book, there is another self-insert, people. Now, in the previous book, the writer had a name. I don't remember what that name is, but I know he had one. And he had his, like, he was raised by his grandmother, his parents died, and this led to him developing the supernatural skills. But he also kind of had, like, his own human life, if it makes sense. Like, he had his career as a writer, he has actual relatives, he needs money to live, and he just sees things. And he's a writer, and he's a self-insert. Now, and he was also kind of like a hipster, but not that much. Now, in this book, we amp the self-insert to 11 people. Also, I need some water because I am tipsy. Wait, let me pour some water into his shit. Okay, I'm going to put my glass on the table too. Wait, oh shit, wait. Okay, that's another 2 towards my daily intake of 13 glasses of water. Anyway, discussing mouth noises outside, we have, as I mentioned, also look at that glass, isn't it cute? Yeah, yes it is. So, the self-insert. We have another one. Again, this is all canonically in the same universe. So, what do we have here? The second self-insert, who vaguely mentions the first one, like in an off comment, that like he kind of knows who he is. This guy, first of all, he doesn't have a name. He is just called the writer, which by the way is even more hot and mysterious than having a name and being a writer. In this case, he is a writer, but his name is the writer. He doesn't have a name. How mysterious is this? How hot is this? Exactly, a lot. He also went from kind of hipster to full on Victorian / hipster / steampunk outfit. Now, I am not one for ad hominem attacks. I consider them cheap, distasteful, and I know I wouldn't want anyone to like start calling me names because of, you know, how I look, because I think that's just tasteless. So I am not going to put a photo of the author on the screen, even though he is on the cover of a lot of his own books. But if you watch any of his interviews, I've watched 2. I hate myself. 2! That was like 3 hours of my life I'm never getting back. And mind you, I don't even experience time the same way you do. I don't even exist. Anyway, he dresses like a hipster, hardcore. So, you know, make whatever you want out of this. So this new, improved, amazing self-insert, he's called the writer, he's immortal, he's not even a cryptid, he's more like some type of impartial observer, but he's also very much involved. Like, he doesn't actually do anything for the story, but he does take part in it, even though the beginning sets him up and 2 of the sexy redhead witches. Yes, there are witches who literally do nothing. But they're very much set up as those impartial observers. They are in the forest above the city. They're looking down on humanity, and they talk about the humans as stories. But they still very much interact with them, and it's not in a way that's just there to observe them from up close, you know, the way a scientist might, or, you know, someone who goes to an anthill and just like observes the ants doing whatever ants do. I'm betting something very much more productive than me right now. No, like especially the writer takes a lot of takes like a big part in certain events in the story. Again, he doesn't change anything. He doesn't do anything, but he is there. Something else about him, again, he is no longer a human with spiritual powers. He is, I cannot speak. He is full on a liminal / spiritual being. He is not a god. He is not a cryptid. He is some type of being, kind of. He talks about humanity as if they're nothing more than characters in his story, which, okay, the first book was actually better in portraying the writer as a freaking like distant psychopathic douchebag, because he had this very almost like disdain and hatred for like everything human, because it was so like base instinct-y. Well, this guy, he says he's above all of this, but he just kind of doesn't act it. And this is actually something which we're going to see quite frequently here. So we do have a new and improved self-insert, who again is pale, dark-haired, gray-eyed, hipster, and very, very hot. Like, people see this man and they are just ready to sink to their knees, because not only is he so mysterious, but he also radiates this coldness, this like aversity to everything basic and human. He's so much above us. And I include myself, even if, you know, the whole not being human thing. Because, like, I'm sure, like, he would consider some type of, like, liminal domestic spirit like me to be, like, on par with you guys. They're, like, under the bed. So, you know, what can you do? And, like, he's meant to, like, the text tells us he is this high above us being. He's detached. He's cool. He is so cold that it's almost scary. And then the text shows us he's just like a regular character. Like, he's not even the only character who doesn't actually use his name. There's like another one. So, he's just a self-insert who is very hot. But he's like more hot and more mysterious than the first self-insert, because again, he is in fact what, immortal, which means he doesn't just have like the sight. He is also just like magic, I guess. Again, I read the entire book series and I still have no idea what he is, and I don't think I care that much. It could be like maybe the author would say that it was just he was meant to be not understood, that his existence doesn't need to be told, that not everything people needs to be known. I just saw I have a bald spot. Yeah, that like, yeah. Anemia will do to you people. Hair starts falling off. Anyway, he is a very hot self-insert. And to me, it's actually amazing how this man with degrees and a job, like, he very blatantly slapped a self-insert in one of his books and then thought, no, wait, I need a better self-insert in my other book. And by better, I mean just someone who is more sexy and more sexy. That's how he is. He's just more hot, I guess. That's it. I need more water. Wait, need to hydrate. Anyway, so you might be going, but December. Okay, you know what? That's enough use of my name. I don't like this. I hate it when like customer service people are like have to use your name because their bosses tell them. Like, I've been there. It's just like nobody likes that. I'm not going to tell you how to call me because I know you people, like, you're nasty. Anyway. But you might ask, okay, like you've been yapping for like half an hour, which, true. The recording is currently at 42 minutes, so even more than half an hour on my end. And you might say, when are you going to tell us about the plot? When are you going to tell us about the characters? To which I'm going to say one more point, and then we're going to go to the actual plot. And I don't mean this in like, haha, plot. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. No, no. There aren't enough boobs in this book to like be called like, plot. No, that's just like regular plot. Whatever. Okay. And I said I'm going to go over one more point regarding the story before I go into the actual details. Is this disjointed? Probably yes. Again, wine. Like, I'm in the middle of the bottle. It's a whole bottle. Like, not like the 300 ml one, the big ones. Okay. And the point which I would like to take with you is the supernatural part of the book. And I don't mean that sometimes there is supernatural stuff. The whole story is about finding who you were always meant to be before the world destroyed you, before the world crushed you. And kind of going and learning how to be this amazing best version of yourself. Which, okay, this also kind of is linked to the underworld part, which again I think is there. And because again, this part of the underworld is supposed to be a place where you heal, where the things that hurt you in life kind of stop mattering that much, I guess. And the supernatural part of the book is all about the squares. I call them the squiggles. The closest thing to a main character which we have calls them the squares. Now, it is very, very carefully... Those are tarot cards. Just, those are literary, no, not literary, literally tarot cards that are called squares. And this actually is another part which I'm going to mention later if I don't forget. Wait, I'm going to write it down. Wait, I'm going to write it down. Not Christian, but Christian. Okay, just so I don't forget. Because again, I have my notes, but I haven't been following them so far, and also based on my notes I can make like a 5-hour video, and we don't want that. Now, there's a lot of mysticism in Gaia. There is a lot of mysticism surrounding the newest person who comes to the underworld, who comes to Gaia. This is Sarah, her name is Sarah. And Sarah sees squares, as she called them. She sees in her mind those symbols. And she can kind of read them. She gets visions. She feels energies. And if you think that sounds kind of fun, it's not. Because even though it takes a huge part of the book, and I keep calling it a book because that's what it is. Even though it takes a huge part of the book, her with those mystic squares, again, they're literally tarot cards, which she calls something else, and they're not tarot cards, like they don't have the names like the tarot cards, but they have their own names, and they're linked to deities that are so ancient that people don't remember them or their names, but they still can influence us, and she actually can like read them. So she made her own deck and then thought, wait, no, that sounds too pagan, I'm going to call them the squares. So that's not what she did, but we know that's the thought process. And there's so much mysticism so much supposedly esoteric texts or thoughts thrown in this book that if you remove all of that, if you remove the magic from the writer and the sexy red-headed witches, if you remove Virginia's weird feelings that her brother keeps being reborn again and again and slipping through her fingers, if you remove Sarah's dreams and leave them to be just dreams, if you remove Anima's demon and make it just be horrendous abuse coming from homophobic or transphobic parents, if you remove every single bit of magic from those books, the length would be cut in half, but the plot would not change one bit. I am going to repeat it. If you remove everything supernatural and you don't even try to make it delicate, just straight up delete the text. Don't edit it. Just delete the text. Nothing in the plot would change. The plot would make as much sense as it does now if you straight up rip off the pages. Again, I do not advise this. I never advise destruction of books. But my point is, those two books are so focused on this mystical, spiritual, magical concept of those dreams and those visions and those squiggles. And yet, in this urban fantasy, because that's what this is, the author called it magic realism, I'm going to call it urban fantasy. In this urban fantasy, if you remove the fantasy part completely, nothing is going to change. I'm going to actually give you an example because you could say, well, a lot of like supernatural books are just like metaphor for something else, which yes, maybe it is. But I'm going to give you an example with Twilight. I know a lot of people love to hate on Twilight. I am not one of them. I kind of did when I was like 18, but I grew out of this. Like, I'm no longer a not like the other girls. I just it's so exhausting. I have like a pink lamp in my room. Like, what are you even talking about? But the quick example with Twilight is what would happen in the Twilight series if you simply cut off every sentence or every mention that Edward is a vampire, that the Cullens are vampires, that the vampires and werewolves exist. The story would not make sense, because the entire story is based on the supernatural. Edward and Bella don't have sex because he's afraid of hurting her, because he's a vampire. He insists on them getting married and her experiencing life because of what immortality would do to her, because he knows immortality is not a nice thing to have. The whole fourth book happens because a child of a vampire should not be possible to happen. The whole third book and everything is because there are those predators who don't see humans as humans. There's the whole thing with the werewolves, who obviously don't have beef with some of the white people there, but they have beef specifically with those white people because they are vampires. They're the pale ones, they're the bloodsuckers. If you remove every single thing that is supernatural in Twilight, you would still need to rework the text until it basically becomes 50 Shades of Grey for it to make sense. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. And I'm not saying that Twilight is a good book, but I think it's very suitable for its audience. And I also think that it is well done in a fantasy where if you remove the fantasy, the book doesn't work, right? Like, it just doesn't. A lot of those books are banking on the supernatural being supernatural and being there. In those books, in depth. Everything will happen the exact same way if you remove the fantasy. I'm not even joking. And I think this is a failure from the author's side. I think that if you're writing some type of fantasy book, you didn't do it well. You didn't build your world well enough. If the fantasy could just be removed and nothing would change. The book is full of not strange, it's full of spiritual theories and, theological thoughts, which, while I understand why some people might be into this, I would say if you want to write a theological essay, just write a theological essay. If you want to write an essay on spiritualism, on the male and female energy in every single one of us, more in some than the others, especially if you have like some annoyingly high testosterone levels, but that's neither here nor there. If you want to write an essay about this, just do it. If you want to write a jumbled story which focuses a lot on spiritualism, write that. But do not try to pass it as a novel, as something with a plot, because that's not what this is. This is trying to be so many things that it fails in all of them. It wants to be a magic realism, I would call it urban fantasy book. It fails at this because the fantasy does nothing. It wants to be a personal story of people growing, developing. But in the end it doesn't work because those are still horrible people who do not understand how what they did was wrong. It wants to be this deeply spiritual experience, but again it doesn't work because it still has those actual plots that need to happen. And in the end it ends up this very flat, two-dimensional story that is being moved around by cardboard cutouts. And none of the characters learns better. They don't end up better people. They just get rewarded for suffering, but this suffering hasn't actually led to anything. They're not rewarded because their suffering made them better people. The whole story implies that pain by itself cleanses you. That if you suffer enough, no matter the outcome, you would deserve to be rewarded. But neither of those characters learns better. Neither of those characters becomes a better person. And trust me, neither of those characters is a good person to begin with. So there is a lot they can develop into, and yet they don't. So what is the whole point then? Who am I supposed to sympathize? And this is not me being dramatic. I mean, maybe it's me being dramatic, but I'm making a book review on YouTube. Obviously, I want to be dramatic. But even aside from me being dramatic, I'm going to ask you. I'm asking everyone who has read this book, if there's anyone there, please tell me, who am I supposed to root for? Who am I supposed to sympathize with? Who am I supposed to like from the characters? Please tell me. Point me a character who is likable. Aside from like the main character's best friends who show up as kids at the beginning, as adults all the way at the end, for like one page on both sides. Show me a character who is anything near worthy of deserving of getting a happy ending. And I'll call you a liar. Because all those people are horrible people. The main characters who go to the underworld, who kill their old lives, who die, metaphorically, to be able to be cleansed and move to heaven. They're not cleansed. The main character, whose sin is becoming a sugar baby to a man who she doesn't refuse at any point in the relationship, because she enjoys the attention, because she enjoys what they do together, because she enjoys his money. There is nothing wrong with that. But you cannot do that. You cannot go with him the moment he asks you out. You cannot live in his house, enjoy everything he gives you, almost marry him. She abandons him at the altar. She runs away in her wedding dress. Okay, guys, just a little bit of a, editing cat input. Anyway, I'm just going to say a couple of things which I realized during the editing that I actually forgot to say, so, yeah. First of all, Sarah, the main character, the one with the squiggles, she starts going to therapy because she and her fiance want to fuck the therapist. And she basically seduces the therapist during one of the sessions, and they actually do, in fact, her and her fiance have sex with the therapist. So, just that's another one who needs his license burned. You cannot participate willingly in the threesomes that he's into. You cannot be into this and then turn around and claim to be a victim. She was not manipulated by him. If there is someone who manipulated her about this, it was her mother when she was 10. But this is not the fault of this man. Is he a good character? No, because he turns physically abusive. But she has no ground to stand on and say that she didn't want this. Was she punishing herself? Maybe. Maybe, yes, maybe we can say that. But she was also very much in text, enjoying it. She did not see it as punishing herself. She saw it as the way she was meant to live, because she was beautiful enough to catch the eye of a rich man. And then she dares to complain that snobby rich people treat poor people the way snobby rich people usually treat poor people. And she dares to be surprised that her snobby rich fiancé would imply that poor people are beneath him. She delights in the things he gives her, both the material and the emotional. He adores her. And she basically enjoys it. And yet, when the time comes, she turns around and calls him names and says she is not some low whore to be bought, even though, well, isn't she? Just because her price tag is higher, isn't she? The other one is Virginia, who is the dominatrix, one of the redheads. Professional dominatrix who films her scenes without the permission or consent or the knowledge of the men who engage in those scenes with her. They don't know there's cameras in the rooms. They don't know she records and sells them the videos. That's how she makes her money, because she is very rich. She sells bondage pornography online, which she records without the knowledge or consent of the people who participate in those scenes with her. And we are supposed to want her to be better. We're supposed to root for her because she had tragic past. By the end of the book, she never even thinks what she is doing is wrong. she is never punished for doing this. She has suffered in her previous life when she had a miscarriage and she learned she has PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome. And she was told she would never be able to get pregnant again. First of all, no doctor would tell her that. No OBGYN would tell her that because she has PCOS, she can never get pregnant. That's a lie. No doctor would say that, or if they do, they are a fraud and should have their license set on fire in front of them. It might make it more difficult, but it is at no point something that would prevent her 100% from getting pregnant. And then the text says, well, she needs to suffer more. So when she was a child, her brother died. And then she lost her unborn child. And then her husband leaves her because he wants his own children. And then she decides to punish herself by becoming a dominatrix. And this is actually also linked to the part which I wrote down a few minutes ago, which I'm going to go back to. But the point is she really punishing herself? And the answer is yes. She does not enjoy what she does. She does not enjoy those scenes. She deserves to be punished, she thinks. But she deserves to be punished not because of what she does to those men, but because she was not woman enough. She deserves to be in pain, she thinks, because she lost the life which she had. She had what she thinks as a great husband, a great life in Italy, and she lost it all, and she thinks she deserves to be punished for that. She has an image of the Virgin Mary in the room where she records the scenes, because she's also kind of the epitome of atheist written by someone who is not an atheist, because she claims she doesn't believe in God because God took away her brother when they were children. And her proof that God is not real is that she put the Virgin Mary image in the place where she records her videos. And she says that if God was real, then the moment she started doing those things, she does, again, bondage scenes in front of the image of the Virgin Mary, she would have been struck by lightning or something. And because she hasn't, this is the proof she needs that God doesn't exist. And yet, God is the one she's mad at for taking away her brother. So, what is she even doing? And in the end, she gets her happy ending with a new fiancé, and she gets pregnant. Just like hundreds of thousands of women do, even though they have PCOS. Again, it's not a sentence that you would never get pregnant. And a lot of people do get pregnant because they think it lowers their chances a lot, which it does, but that's still, like, it only needs to fail once. And there are other characters. There is a character called the White Prince. That's how they literally call him. He has albinism. And the text wants us to believe, and I have been told by Kay, that I was wrong in partially about this, and I thank her about this, that people with albinism can face a lot of prejudice. The thing about I'm going to call him Silas. Okay, he has a name. His name is Dimitar. He calls himself the White Prince, literally in the text. That's how he refers to himself as. I'm going to call him Silas because, well, I don't think Dan Brown is a good writer, I still think the albino assassin in the Da Vinci Code was way too funny as a character, so I'm going to call him Silas. Silas has albinism, but he also has blue eyes, which apparently is possible. But he has the pale skin and the pale hair. He is an internationally acclaimed model. He is so attractive that he gets modeling contracts not because he looks different, but because he's so conventionally attractive. And yet the text wants us to believe that people with disabilities, because he does live streams, also the author doesn't know how live streaming works, but whatever, that's just me. He does live streams where he talks about his disability and how people treat him really well despite his disability, which is being born with albinism, and the prejudice which how brave he is, more or less, to go outside there in the world because of the prejudice which he would face. And he lies on those live streams and says that his parents are proud of him. They aren't. They kicked him out for having albinism. But the point is, the text tells us that there's a lot of people with other disabilities, a lot of disfigurement, either by birth or through accident or genetic, who are those disabilities are not something which they kind of dare to go outside and show to people because of how society would react. And they do name a couple of those syndromes, and I did not Google it. One of my friends did, and because she knows that I have a very weak stomach, she just told me not to. The author basically says that someone with such extreme disfigurement that people would literally turn away from them even if they're wearing a mask out in public because people suck. Like, we as humans are garbage. The author wants us to believe that those people who have been shunned by society because of something they cannot control feel empowered by a conventionally attractive man who is a very, very rich international model daring to go outside. I'm not saying the author equates those two things, but it's almost like he does. And I'm sorry, but I'm not into that. There are a lot, if we consider how many main characters and also not so main characters we have, the number of people who have experienced sexual abuse when they were young amongst those characters. I read somewhere a piece of advice for authors, new authors, old authors, people who are just starting to write, people who have tons of books published. And this advice was, if you can use anything other than sexual assault as a plot point, do it. There is a disturbing number of backstories in this book that are just based on sexual assault, as either as a child or as a teenager. And I think that's tasteless. I'm just going to say I think that's tasteless. I'm not going to say that the author went too far in this case. The author himself, in one of the interviews which I watched, which again, one of those interviews is 2 hours, the other one is 1 hour. I did not enjoy either of those. The author says in one of those interviews that he doesn't think there is a line he wouldn't cross. That he doesn't think a theme, any theme, is too dark. Because things just need to be said. And I think that one should know exactly how far they could go. But I also think that if you are writing a fictional novel, this is not a historical book. This is not a biography. This is not an exploration of the human psyche, no matter how much he wants it to be. I think you should maybe pick another trauma as a backstory. I don't think four of your two types of main characters being sexually assaulted as children, I don't think this shows good ideas or strong ideas as a writer. I just don't. I think it's tasteless. I think it shows lack of creativity and imagination. I think that while some of those were integrated with it well, and some were not, mind you, I don't think most of your main characters' backstories should be sexual assault. Mostly because them being sexually assaulted does not play a point in the plot. They're all different backstories that lead to them meeting, but none of them knows the other ones have experienced this. So what's the point? The assault isn't part of the it's not a plot point. It's just a cheap, very cheap way to make us sympathize with those characters. Because this is the one crime which cannot be excused. You cannot do this in self-defense. You cannot do this because you're starving. You cannot do this because you have no other choice, because life is pressing on you. And this is the cheapest plot point, cheapest tragic backstory you could use, and he used it 4 times. What do you want me to say? I'm not going to say anything. There is so much prejudice in this book. And by the way the text treats characters, we could actually see how the author sees those characters. Let me drink some water, because my throat is going to be shot tomorrow, by the way. I hope you're happy. Nice. Room temperature water, my favorite. By the way the text treats characters, you can tell the author's opinion of them. And what do I mean by this? Let me lower my microphone a bit more. What do I mean by this? You see this a lot. Not so much in traditional fiction, but a lot more in fan fiction, or the less popular, maybe like online novels, e-novels. Places where people are not so bound by tropes and also formulas and the rigid structure of traditional publishing. By the way the text treats a character, again, you can see what the author thinks of them. And there is a lot of writers who hurt their characters, but you could see it. Just, you know, the love they have for this character. Sometimes you gotta. Sometimes you have to build them. You have to allow them to build themselves after they go through so much. And yet, sometimes you see an author hurt a character, and then just by the way they talk about them, the way the text treats them, you can see that the author didn't really care about that. And in this book, we have so much prejudice towards so many different types of people that I honestly don't know what the author was thinking. So many times during this book, I thought this had to be satire. I thought this cannot be serious. This man cannot be playing this straight. And you know what's the worst thing? I think he is. I think this is what he thinks is the best way this novel could have been written. And I think this is horrendous. What do I mean by this? There is a lot of physical description which is obviously meant to dehumanize some of the characters. Sad characters, of course. We have some of the... I'm going to just call them extras. We have some of the extras who are overweight, but they're described with such repulsion on the other side. They are described as animals. Or more like the characters who are shown in their most animalistic are the ones who are shown as overweight. The author is clearly disgusted by them, and we're also meant to be disgusted by their behavior. So why did they need to be overweight? There is a very, very side character who takes part in one of the main characters' plot. And the main one of the main characters is an escort. And because of him, I'm going to go back to the point which I wrote down a few minutes ago. His client, first of all, doesn't know that she is his client, because her father pays this man, who is an escort, to pretend to be in love with her, to take her on dates, to tell her, to whisper her sweet nothings. This woman has severe eating disorder. Severe. And her physical description of this woman, who obviously has such a strong psychological problem that it has transcended her mind and is slowly killing her, literally. She is described with such disgust from the side of the author. We're meant to be repulsed by how she is described. He describes in detail how her eating disorder has affected her physically. He describes in detail how she was not born, or when she was growing up, she didn't develop traditionally pretty features. And that's when she turned to an eating disorder. And it made her even more ugly. This woman is described in a way that's meant to make the reader be disgusted by her, simply because she has an eating disorder. She is later revealed to be a horrible person. But can you blame her? Everyone has a choice, and yet she had been lied by her father, by this man who claimed to love her. She has been sold because, and this in this case, just tells her that her father tells her in her face that she has never deserved to be loved for who she is. And not only that, but we're meant to hate her even before we learn that. We're meant to be disgusted by her simply because she has an eating disorder. There is a character, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail of this, because I am not the right person to talk about this. I am neither knowledgeable nor educated enough to have the right stance, and also, as someone who has never had any dysphoria, I do not think I have enough knowledge or experience to really go into detail for this. But there is a character who was born intersex, who is a female. She sees herself as a woman. Her gender is female. And who was forced by her parents and doctors as a child to take testosterone and to present as male. This character is one of the main villains of the story because of how her dysphoria affects her. And the author of this book hates this character so much. The text itself, the plot, the author, the characters we're supposed to root for and love are so cruel to this woman. The text itself is destructive towards her. It wants us to hate her. It wants us to cheer when everything she wants is taken from her. When she's being physically abused, when she's almost killed. We're supposed to feel pity for her, but before this we're supposed to hate her, because the author hates her. This actually brings me back to the previous book, where we had one queer character, the other one doesn't matter, he's just a prop. If the author wants us to hate this character so much, before he gives them what in his mind is a redemption arc, if the author hates queer people so much, why even bother writing them? If you're going to take such glee into torturing a character, if you're going to write such graphic, horrible scenes of torture, and no, this isn't me being soft. I'm just saying that the only scenes of such graphic brutality and sadism from the author's side are towards this woman. Why? Nobody made you write a queer character. Nobody made you write an intersex character. If you didn't want to, why did you do it? None of this was necessary. And there are several points in this book that upset me a lot. And one of the reasons they upset me is because the author doesn't get, just like his characters, or more like his characters, because of him, do not understand that what they're doing is not right. One of the other main characters is so homophobic, but in the end, she kicks out her cheating husband, and she is rewarded with a husband the same age as her son. And I know this because they were in the same class. She is rewarded with a man her son's age. I mean, he's like 20 something, so he's not like a teenager anymore, but he was in the same high school class as her son. She is rewarded with a man her son's age, who worships the ground she walks on, who is ready to sacrifice, to give up everything for her, who would love her, who has loved her unconditionally since he was 15. She is rewarded with this man giving her everything she's ever dreamed of, because she kicked out her cheating husband. But she never accepts her son, who is gay. Even when he says he's gay, she is mad, she's crying, but she isn't even mad at... She is mad at him, obviously, but she's more mad because she lost so much of her life to her son, who she considers to be ungrateful, as if him being queer is him being cruel to punish her. Why? What was the point? That's what I don't that's what I don't understand in some of those books. If it was better written by like a bad person, you can see what they were trying to do. You may not like it, but you can see it. In this case, what was the point? Why would you write this? You didn't have to. Nobody pressed a gun to your head and made you write this. Why? There are several scenes in this book where the characters are so cartoonish. Everyone in this book is so cartoonish. They're so two-dimensional. And I don't Yet why? We we have two scenes where the main characters are celebrating, while the crowd, the mob, the, the, the amalgamation of evil in the world, which observes them through the window, stands there and watches and calls them names, while they, the main characters, the special ones, the real ones, are having fun because they're the only ones who know what that means. Because they're not part of the herd. Because they're not like those sheep, those small, narrow-minded village people. They're not like them, you see. They're not so prejudiced. They are ready to embrace the difference, the different. They know how to have fun. They know how to live. While all those other people, the crowd, the faceless, nameless crowd, all it knows is how to be jealous. All it knows is how to be destructive. The main characters are not like them, you see. When they hold a funeral for their dear friend, they take pictures for Instagram and talk about how many likes this is going to get. When they're giving speeches at the funeral, each one of them talks only about themselves. When they go back to a village where one of them as a child was abused, they hold a whole concert and then spray the crowd with white paint, and they think this is amazing. And they scream and dance, and it's magical because they're not like those narrow-minded village people. By the way, my mom and my dad, both of them come from villages, and this is how the story portrays them, like the people from small towns. And I'm supposed to sympathize with those main characters because they're not like them. They're real. That's what they are. They're real. They're real people who are there to find their lives and make it better. They're open-minded. They're ready to face the real world. They're not so buried under their own hatred and prejudice that they would not be able to see anything else. Anyway, what is the plot of this story? Each of the main characters follows their own plot. Sarah runs away from her wedding, rents a car, moves to Gaia, completely picking it at random, and then she meets a man, they have sex. He is too weak to be healed by the beaches of Acheron, so he fails, he relapses. She isn't. She moves on. She moves on of the trauma of her mother telling her that nobody would ever love her and that money is the only thing that matters. She moves on from the trauma of being the only survivor of a car crash. She moves on from being a sugar baby. She moves on. She goes back to painting. There's the White Prince, who as a child was abused by his family in their entire town because he was born with albinism. Kids would mock at him on the bus, which is why he developed epilepsy. He has seizures. He ran away from home as a teenager, and he met Virginia, who took him in. And then he became an international supermodel. That's it. Story's over. Virginia was a good Catholic girl in Italy, and then her brother died when they were very young, and she hated God for taking him away. And then she met a lovely man and had a lovely wedding, and then she got pregnant, and it was everything she'd ever dreamed of. And then she lost the baby, and then she lost her man. So in her grief, she goes to Gaia and starts punishing herself, starts trying to challenge God to make him prove he's real. Even though everything she's been doing is punish herself and trying to punish God. Dionysus, the last one, the weak one, the one who was abused as a very small child by his acting teacher, the one who suppressed the memories but tried to reclaim his freedom by using the same name he was forced to use for his acting teacher, who became an escort, first of all for the money and then because he liked the power. He liked the detachment. He liked being someone else. He liked being Mr. X. Because Mr. X was powerful. He didn't bow to anyone, and he was finally reclaiming the power that the name Mr. X held over him. And yet he's the one who doesn't go to heaven, because he's weak. He's offered a chance to remember. His memories are unlocked, and yet he begs for oblivion. He is not strong enough. So he gets oblivion. His memories are locked away, and he doesn't go to heaven. That's it. Those are the stories. That's the plot. A very specific concept, which I see a lot in so many of those urban fantasy books. Magic realism, paranormal romance, whatever you want to call them, is that how focused they are on being not Christian. It's all about the paganism, the old gods. Even in here, in depths, the old gods come from the squares, and the squares come from the old gods. The tarot cards each are symbols of the old gods. The whole story is about witches and ancient powers of the earth and deities. And yet the book enforces such hardcore, conservative Christian ideas that it's almost laughable. And if the book wasn't so horrible otherwise, I would be laughing, but I'm not. I'm sorry. Men who submit to women are weak and deserve no dignity or forgiveness. The men that Virginia does scenes with are not human enough. They're not men enough to be human. They're not human enough to deserve respect, to deserve to be asked for consent. They're nothing but props in her scenes. Their opinion, their body autonomy doesn't matter. Because they submit to a woman, and that's not what a man does. They're weak. They deserve to have their lives ruined because of it. Neither Virginia nor Dionysus, despite both of them technically being escorts, ever have sex with their clients. Because, well, let's be real. Sex outside of marriage? That's a sin. That's a sin. The gods don't like that. Virginia is a good wife. And then her sin is not being woman enough. She loses the baby. She cannot have another. And yet when she is forgiven, when her sins are repaid, when she is cleansed, when she goes to the Elysian fields, she goes back to being a good little wife. She has a husband. She has a baby. Why would she need anything else? Women who are not women enough don't deserve respect, don't deserve to be human. We see it with the client of Dionysus with the eating disorder. We see it with Virginia when she loses the baby. Men who are not men enough don't deserve to be human. We see it with Virginia's clients. What are we even talking about? I had so much prepared for this book, and it ended up for nothing. But you know what? Whatever. And to end on a lighter note, I want to say there is a scene which I thought it was very ridiculous, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was referenced to something. It was so very specifically a reference to something. And then I read it to one of my friends, and we actually together figured out what it was. And it was so stupid, because if I am right and it is a reference to this one thing, then the author didn't actually really know what he was referencing. And I think that's amazing. There is a scene in the book where after one of the not so main characters dies, another one, the writer, walks away from the scene. And he is wearing a fully red tuxedo with a red hat. And his companion, one of the sexy redhead witches, is wearing a white gown. Now, those are described in so much detail that I knew it had to be a reference to something. It couldn't have not been a reference to something. I just couldn't figure out what it was. But then, with sharing some brain cells, we actually figured it out. It's the Phantom of the Opera. So, it references, actually, two scenes in the Phantom of the Opera that, unfortunately, have nothing to do with each other. The characters are wearing outfits that two characters, again, in the Phantom of the Opera wear, but they never wear them together. Those scenes are very much separated by plot, by time, by characters, which I think is so stupid, but also amazing. The writer is dressed as Death from The Mask of the Red Death. Wait, was it that? Wait. It was called, let me see, Phantom of the Opera Red Death. Let me see, so this is, yeah. So he is dressed as The Mask of the Red Death, which is a short story written by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, in the Phantom of the Opera, the Phantom is dressed like this character. So, the Phantom of the Opera is already a reference to Edgar Allan Poe's short story. And the writer is dressed like the Phantom of the Opera character, who is dressed like Death in Edgar Allan Poe's short story. Varvara, the witch, is dressed like Christine in probably the most popular movie scene in Phantom of the Opera ever. You can see pictures on both sides of me. But the funny thing again is, they're walking like this through the city, but in the Phantom of the Opera, the Phantom never wears this at any point when Christine is in her white dress. Also, how are they supposed to be referencing those characters when they themselves are not those characters? The writer has nothing to do with the Phantom, and Varvara has nothing to do with Christine. In no shape or form. I didn't really go into that much detail about the plot, because there isn't much to it. I didn't go into that much detail about the magic, because honestly, it's just so much word salad. So many deep thoughts that don't mean anything. That it gets exhausting, but also, for you to understand, I would need to spend the next 10 hours reading this book word by word. And I don't get paid enough for this. I'm sorry. But how am I supposed to finish this? What am I forgetting? I mean, there's a repressed housewife, again, the homophobic one. And she adopts a cat who is basically an ancient god. And she calls him Bunny, and it's the most disgusting thing I've ever read. which I would usually say is just a woman completely losing her mind because she does not read like a sane person. And yet, she gets rewarded in the end. By a young man who makes all of her dreams come true, including giving her an orgasm. Anyway. There's a lot of other characters I could have talked about, but honestly, there's no point. Every single person in this book is a horrible person. Every single trope is so two-dimensional and cartoonish, I cannot even take any of them seriously. Those horrible people are rewarded for their horrible behavior because they do fulfill, they go back the right path based on Christianity, even if they're horrible people. Because I don't think the author considers them to be horrible people. I don't think he considers what Virginia does to those men. She does very much not talked about scenes with. There is no discussion of safe words. There is no discussion of what's going to happen. They just come to her apartment. No questions asked. I don't think the author considers what he does to Anima to be that bad. Or he doesn't consider why he needed a character with such past to hurt this much. I think he thinks he is right. I think he plays those characters straight. I don't think this is satire. And I think that's terrifying. And I think I need to go to bed. Well, happy Valentine's Day. Happy St. Triffin's Day. I wish you all a very, very warm night. Sleep well. Because I'm going to know if you don't.